guys, welcome back to my channel. I've got some new makeup here that we are going to unbox and try out together today. Both of these are new releases from Natasha Denona. I have the new Hyper-Natural face palette that we are going to test out, and also a new concealer from her. I am very excited to give these both a try. They were crazy expensive, but you guys know I have a weakness for Natasha Denona, so we're gonna open up my box today, have a look at this palette, at the concealer, give them both a try, and I will let you guys know if I think they are worth the very high price tag. Should be a fun one. Before we get into that though, I want to give a special welcome to any of you that are new here. Thank you for stopping by. I hope you enjoy this video. Please consider subscribing to my channel before you leave and make sure that your notifications are turned on. And with that said, let's open up this box. Okay, so here we have the palette and the concealer. Let's open up the palette first. I'm very interested to see the size of this thing. Okay, already I'm a little bit disappointed in the size of this palette, you guys. So I have the retro palette just sitting here on my desktop. This is the Hyper-Natural face palette. So let's give a size comparison of these. Now I know they're not the same palette, obviously. I mean, this one only has 5 eyeshadows in it in addition to some face powders, but that just gives you an idea of kind of what we are working with. Let's open it up. Okay, so the shadows are the same size as what you get in any of her palettes. I think her shadows are always pretty standard sized, but the face powders here, I feel like those are a little on the small side for a face powder, especially for the blushes. I mean, if you wanted to select just one of these two blushes right here, you would have to use a very, very small brush, I imagine. Just based on a first look, very happy with the size of the eyeshadows. Wish that these were just a little bit larger, especially for that high price tag. I just feel like that's a very awkward size maybe to work with certain brushes, but we shall see. So I'm going to insert a close-up of the palette for you guys right here, along with some swatches of both the face powders and the eyeshadows. So looking at the back, it looks like these 4 shades right here, I thought they might be a satin finish. It looks like these might be a new formula. It's called her Hyper Silk eyeshadow. So I'm eager to try those and see how they apply. It does recommend using a dense brush to apply these 4 shades. They do not, however, feel like her cream to powder formula. They do have a bit of sheen to them, but they definitely feel a bit on the creamy side. So that makes me a little bit excited. I'm kind of excited to try these formulas out and see how they perform. You guys know I love her cream to powder formula. And the shimmer right here has so much beautiful sparkle in it. I just know I'm going to absolutely love that. So let's set that to the side really quickly and jump over to the Hy-Glam concealer. I ended up going with the shade Y4. I had a really hard time just looking at the shades, trying to decide which shade might be my correct shade match. So here's what it looks like inside the tube. Hopefully it's not gonna be too dark for my under eye area. I think this will be okay. It is definitely very yellow. I think I'll be able to get away with this on my under eyes. I would love to have another shade of this to use as something more brightening, kind of for my under eye area, for an eyelid primer. I always love having 2 shades of concealer if you can, but this was a pricey concealer, so I thought I would just try one shade out, seeing as I don't quite know yet if I like this formula or not. As far as how much product is inside here, it has 0.236 ounces, which I don't think is terrible. It's not the best, but it's not the worst as far as how much product you get inside a higher end concealer. But again, it's Natasha Denona. It is a little bit on the pricey side. I do love the packaging. It's kind of like rectangular in shape. Very interesting, very pretty. A nice kind of silky matte. Reminds me of my phone case actually that I have on my phone right now. Okay, so I know you guys are probably excited to jump into that palette, but I do have just my foundation on and my brows done. That is all the makeup I have on so far. Oh, and I did my lips, which I'll probably have to redo. But let's try out this concealer and see how much coverage we get out of it. So today the foundation that I used was my About Face foundation. I just did a kind of a basic layer of this, so I just have solid medium coverage, maybe even under medium coverage, because I didn't apply a very heavy layer of that foundation, which if I apply a little bit more heavily can be a solid medium coverage, I would say. I do kind of think this shade is a little bit dark for this area of my face, but I think we'll be able to get away with it. As we move into summer, when I have just a little bit more tan, I think this shade will be fine for my under eye area. For right now, it does just feel a little darker than what I like to typically reach for. This is supposed to be a hydrating concealer. It's supposed to be long wearing, hydrating, have a natural finish. So far, I would agree with the medium coverage claim. feel like that is a solid medium coverage. It's covering most of my hyperpigmentation, but not all of it. I could probably build it up and get a little bit more coverage out of that. Okay, there is concealer all finished. It feels really nice. I like the finish. It's very skin-like. Feels like it's set down really nicely. Good, solid medium coverage. I'm curious to see, actually, let's try that. I want to try building up just a little bit more. I have some serious hyperpigmentation marks right here. I don't know how well you can see those on camera, but I have a little bit of foundation on them. I feel like they're relatively faint, but let's see if I can get those covered up a little bit better. They are very tricky to cover. If you have hyperpigmentation, you will know that. It's probably the hardest thing to cover with really any concealer. Even full coverage concealers don't knock it out 100%, at least in my experience. So I really like that. I think that feels really nice. We'll see how it sits and wears on the face. Let's now jump into the face palette and test out some of these face powders. So we are gonna start off in the bronzer right here. So I think I'm probably just going to do like a full just mix of all the shades together. What do you guys think about this kind of setup right here? I mean, I understand why you would do this if you were planning to use these on the eyes, which I probably will as transition shades, and I do like that. But as far as like using the different shades for the cheeks, again, because the pan size is relatively small, I feel like that makes it would make it a little bit tricky to do that. So I'm just gonna kind of just moving my brush around, just get a good mix of those shades onto my brush. And then we'll see, by the way, this is my Sydney Grace powder brush, and we're just going to tap those on. I don't know that I've ever tried out a bronzer from Natasha Denona before. I have some blushes and highlighters from her. That went on pretty quick. I do like the shade of those three colors mixed together. I was a little worried it might be too cool toned, but it gives me a good amount of warmth. It's not too dark. It definitely shows up on my light skin tone. I'm surprised she doesn't have like two shades of this palette, a light medium and a medium dark. I feel like with anything that has face powders in them, it's hard to make something that's gonna be universal for everyone. So I think it's nice to have kind of two different shade options, but okay. So I actually really like that bronzer. I feel like it's shaped really nicely and warmed at the same time. My favorite bronzers kind of do both. They add a little bit of warmth and a little bit of shaping. They're not ashy or orange, and I feel like this is a perfect shade for me. So very happy with that. Let's jump over to the blush next. For that, I want to grab this old Real Techniques blush brush. And I think today I want to try both shades together. I'm going to start off in the light side and kind of go back and forth. And then just slowly dust that on my cheeks. Okay, there's a second layer. Now I feel like I'm really getting some of that darker pigment from the darker shade right here. Okay, so there is the blush. I went a little bit too far over on this side, but fix that with my sponge. I always like going around the edges with my sponge just to soften the color, make sure it's nice and blended, and then just do a light kind of press into the skin just to make sure the color looks a little bit more natural. That's very pretty. It's very rosy, very kind of bright. I feel like this is a color that would look good on a lot of different skin tones. If you have fair skin, it's going to be very, very bright, so use a very light hand, or be sure to kind of blend it out or kind of tap it in when you're done. But if you have more medium, deeper skin tone, it definitely has quite a bit of pop in it. So that color might work for a lot of different people. Okay, now let's jump over to the eyeshadows. This is what I'm most excited about. So curious about this formula. Am I wrong? Is this a new formula that she's done? I confess, you guys, I skipped over her, what was the name of the palette? It was very gray. It was like all grays. I skipped over that palette. That was the first palette of hers that I've skipped over in a while. I just am not a fan of really cool toned grays. I don't like them. I don't think they look good on me personally. And that palette was chock full of them. I did see some really beautiful lid shades in that one that did tempt me for a minute, but in case you were wondering why I skipped over that one, that was the reason. So we're gonna start off in these bronze shades right here. I'm trying to decide if I want to just stick with one of the colors. Let's go with this one in the middle, the warmer brown. We'll got a little bit of creasing and just run that up. It's a really nice warm transition shade. Add a little bit to my lower lash line. For that, I'm going to take this small fluffy blending brush and run that about halfway across the lower lash line. Okay, now I want to try out some of these shades on the bottom. Let me just give these for a little finger swatch so we can see kind of what we're working with. Do you see that nice sheen that they have? But it's not glittery. That is beautiful. That is a beautiful finish. Let's start off with this dark brown in the outer corner, and then we'll use this as kind of a middle of the lid shade, and then we'll use the sparkly, dreamy, glittery shimmer shade on the inner part of the lid. So recommended using a dense brush for these. I have this angled, kind of very thick, dense brush from Sydney Grace. I'm gonna tap some of that onto just kind of this outer edge of this brush. We're gonna start right at the lash line and just kind of press it in. Actually, I think I went into the wrong shade. I think I went into that one. This one. There we go. I love that. That is so pretty. I'm trying to think of what to compare this finish to. It is a little different than her cream to powder. It does seem to have a little bit more sheen to it, but I don't think it's not shimmery by any means. Subtly glossy looking. It's so pretty. Seems to blend really nicely as well. I'm just taking this brush. It doesn't have anything on it. I'm just kind of dragging a little bit from this outer corner down to meet up with the lower lash line. Just barely. I don't really want to add more. I just want to connect those two. Shape out this corner. Very pretty. Now we're going to take this brown right here and take that on my ring finger. We're going to pop that across the center of the lid. Very nice. Now let's add this shimmer. This is the shade Dreamy. Just look at this, you guys. Oh my gosh. So pretty. Is definitely more sheer, but that sparkle is so reflective. It just really brightens up your eye. Kind of like attracts light to your eye. That is absolutely beautiful. Back to my sponge. I'm just gonna tap off any fallout from that glittery shade. There's a tiny bit just where my finger maybe like nudged my lower inner corner, inner area right there, but seemed to come off pretty nicely. All right, that is absolutely beautiful. Very happy with those. Interesting formulas. Those went on very nicely. They blended almost instantly. I mean, you just tap those shadows on and see how they just meld together. That did not require a lot of time in blending, and that's one of the reasons I love this type of a formula. Again, this I think is a new one that I'm working with, but it does remind me a bit of a shinier version of her cream to powder formula that I absolutely love. Okay, let's move on, or finish off, I should say, by just adding a little bit of liner. I'm just gonna take some of my Wet n Wild liner, add a little bit to the outer waterline and a little baby wing. Then I'm gonna throw on a couple coats of my Flower Beauty mascara. Then we'll come back and have a final look and share a couple final thoughts. All right, guys, here we have the finished look. Shoot, I really like this palette. I kind of was gearing myself up for being critical, and I do have a couple criticisms of it, but kind of more in the way to think about this palette than necessarily in how it performed. As far as everything, how everything performed, the eyes are amazing. I absolutely love this finish in the outer corner. I can't quite describe it to you guys. It really is just a slightly glossier, or it's not glossy as in like it's greasy in any way, but it just, that little sheen that it gives looks almost glossy on your eyes, and these shades all blended together so seamlessly. Very happy with how the eyeshadow turned out. As far as the cheeks, now I forgot, I was gonna maybe try and use this shimmer on as a highlighter, but it's way too glittery. I mean, this really, for me personally, would not work as a highlighter, so I actually don't have a highlighter on yet. Why don't we go ahead and add? I pulled out my Natasha Denona Super Glow highlighter. I don't know if she makes this anymore. Mine is so old, but heaven knows I can't not wear a highlighter. So I'm gonna add this really quick, and then we'll get back to my thoughts on the palette. Just a little bit on the tops of my cheeks. Okay, as for the palette for the cheeks, I really like how the bronzer went on, how the blush went on. Now I did mention that I was a little bit disappointed in the size of these pans. You know, looking at something online then seeing in person, especially when you're thinking like eyeshadows compared to a face product. That's just a smaller pan for something that's meant to be used for the face in a palette that's so expensive. This was a $62 palette. So basically you're getting one of her mini palettes, which I think now are like $28 maybe, 27 to 29, and then 2 face products. So I don't know. I don't necessarily think that's too much considering it is Natasha Denona, which you expect you're going to pay a little bit more. But I think when you're thinking about the bronzers and the blush shades, as far as how they're separated, I think that separation in a practical sense is really just meant for the eyes. Like using these individually would really only work on your actual eyes. Using them on the cheeks, I just think you would probably just need to combine everything together, both with the blushes and with the bronzer, different shades, which I did think worked really well. But it made the versatility of this just a little bit different for me. I kind of imagine that this might be a little bit more customizable even for your cheeks, and I think that's a little bit more difficult to do because of the size of them. That said, I like how everything performed. I'm wild about this formula right here, which is new to me. It's a different formula from her that I haven't seen before. And as far as how the finished look came together, the cheeks look amazing, the eyes look amazing. So the biggest question is this palette worth the $62 that I paid for it? I think that depends. I'm very happy with it. I think I'm gonna get a lot of use out of this palette. So for me personally, I will say yes, but keep in mind, reviewing makeup is what I do here on YouTube. So I'm a little bit more lax in as far as what I'm willing to spend my personal money on. But if I didn't do this, I would be much more reluctant to justify spending the money on this, even though I really like it. I hope that made sense. Basically, I'm just saying, if you have the money to spend, if budget is not the biggest concern for you, or you're just wondering about quality, I think the quality is great, but the price tag is pretty hefty. As for the concealer, so far I'm pretty happy with it. It's really just gonna take me more time. I think my skin looks really nice. It had good solid medium coverage. It's not the greatest covering, like the highest coverage concealer that I've ever tried. I actually think my Flower Beauty Serum Concealer has a little bit more coverage than this one right here. So just based on a first impression, and my thoughts may change as I get to know this a little bit better, I probably would recommend the Flower Beauty Concealer over this one, other than the fact that the shade range is gonna be a lot more varied and wide with Natasha Denona versus what you get from Flower Beauty, which is nice. But I think the coverage of the Flower Beauty is just a little bit better. But those are my thoughts on everything so far. Have you guys tried out these products? I know that they've been out for a couple of weeks now. Let me know if you guys had different thoughts on them. What did you think about this new formula? I am absolutely loving it. I think this eye look is just so beautifully blended and glorious, and it didn't require a lot of work. But I've only used it once so far. So I will keep you guys posted as I get to know these shadows a little bit better, some of the face powders, the concealer. But so far, I am pretty happy with it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video today and found it helpful. Let me give you one last reminder before you leave. Please consider subscribing to my channel, and I will see you guys very soon in my next video. Bye.